Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Dear Future Self, the Life by Taylor podcast. This week we're going to be doing something a little bit different, and I'm going to give you a disclaimer and say that you do not have to be Jewish, you do not have to be religious to gain something from this episode. If you come into this episode with an open mind, I promise you will take something out of it. I've recently just started to become a little bit more curious about Jewish spirituality and understanding a little bit more about Judaism, and as someone who is not raised religious and who has very little knowledge on spiritual teachings and religious teachings, I can say that it has really opened my mind and really provided me a lot of insights that I take with me into my daily life. So for us to do this, I actually got into this because a really good friend of mine, Daniel, which you'll meet in a minute, offered to he offered to give me a book that I would like that kind of breaks down, we're going to talk about what this book is, but breaks down different Jewish teachings. And he and I have been meeting on a weekly basis to discuss these things. And I said, wow, we really, really have to record this on the podcast. People would gain so much from it. So without further ado, let's get started. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Taylor.
Let's start with who you are. Let's tell people who you are, and you'll also tell them what we're reading from, what this book is. Go ahead.
Okay, so hello everybody, my name is Daniel. From South Africa originally. Actually, Taylor's made a video about me before, which I should let you know still pays dividends in terms of like when I need to explain myself to people, I'm like, oh, watch this video. I think it does a very good job of explaining. So maybe you could like cue the clip.
play video that I made of Daniel like a million years ago.
But yeah, so Taylor and I met in university in IDC. I wasn't really a very religious Jew back then, a learned Jew, should I say. But over the course of the last few years, I've started learning, and really, my whole life has been affected and changed by the teachings of Chabad Hasidism in particular. And that's pretty much what we're going to be looking at and looking into today is really the foundations of Chabad Hasidism.
What is Chabad Hasidism, and what's the difference between, I think a lot of people just don't, I'm going to tell you how I saw things when I looked into the religious world. It's all the same. They're all learning the same thing. Some people are more extreme, some are less extreme. That's what I knew.
I think the reason that a lot of people don't connect with religion, or maybe Yiddishkeit in particular, is that they have this sort of medieval belief that religion is a sort of, heaven and hell, and it's do good and don't do bad. And like every normal person, we don't like to feel judged. So if you put me into an organization and to a practice which everything I do is being judged, that can be quite off-putting for people.
For sure. Very, very, I think that idea of it being off-putting does come from, I've never thought of it that way. I just wanted to make that note to make sure people heard that a lot of people do feel like they do not belong in the world of religion because they are afraid of that judgment. I definitely have felt that before. I felt like I don't belong there. I sin. I'm not considered good based on what this religion speaks of.
And I think that's very normal. And so along came Hasidus and the Baal Shem Tov, and really what the Baal Shem Tov brought into the world, what Hasidus brought into the world, was a new way of relating to God. Because at the end of the day, that's what religion is. Religion is the mode to which we connect to God. It's all about God at the end of the day. It's all about connecting to the creator of the universe, the infinite one. I'm using more commonly used words, but we're saying the same thing. Yeah. Realizing that people had this difficult time relating to religion. People were not so learned in those days. It was really only smart Talmidei Chachamim, very, very learned Jews who were able to really access this. The Baal Shem Tov wanted that each person should be able to connect in his own way. The novelty that Hasidus brings is, instead of relating to religion and God as heaven and hell, good and evil, he brought this idea into the world of soul and body.
Beautiful.
Soul and body, that you can live your life according to the view of I'm a soul that's living in a body. And there's a very famous, I mean, I guess you could even see it on Pinterest, but it's like some people relate to themselves as bodies with souls, and then other people, and this is more the teaching of Hasidus, is that you're a soul with a body.
Yes.
And the purpose of life is to really connect to your soul and connect to, and through that connect to your body. And we take care of our physical health, our emotional health, our mental health,
spiritual health.
And spiritual health is very important because your soul is really who you are. And when you connect to that, you are the most connected you could be to yourself.
Amen.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. Yes, I think that it's really important, even before we get started and before we talk about what this book really is, to remind you that the terminology isn't as limited as we're going to be speaking about it. I think that when I listen, I've told you this, that I listen to Oprah's podcast and she brings on her favorite pastor or bishop and they speak about things in the context of Christianity, I can still extract from it very interesting points to reflect on, or even information that makes me think about things differently and opens my mind to seeing a different side of spirituality. And I think my ability to do that is really not common. I think people hear the word Jesus or they hear the word God and they quickly turn it off. And I want to challenge people who are listening to this to really give it a fair chance, to really keep an open mind, like I always say, and try to take from it what you can in a way that speaks to you. You can really, change the word God with the universe or with the creator or with anything that you feel comfortable with. But at the end of the day, I really do believe that at our core, we all do have a soul. And when we speak of the soul, most of the time we're speaking of the same thing. There isn't too many differences. When I look at different teachings and different religions and different things people are saying, and even things on Pinterest, can all have this one common denominator in certain aspects. So I think that don't let the context turn you off from this. Keep an open mind, and we will get started.
Okay.
So what are we reading from? What is this book?
So the name of this book is GPS for the Soul. This is more of this is a broken down version of the Tanya. Okay. If you want to work on your soul, you go and you learn Tanya.
Yeah.
If you want to connect to who you are on a soul level, you open up a Tanya and you learn it. Now,
beautiful.
It's not an easy book to read. I can tell you that, like point blank. I've been learning it for a few years now, and this book in particular breaks it down into very palatable.
Simplified.
Yeah, it's a simplified way of learning it and understanding it, and
even then it can be complicated.
And even then it can be complicated.
Yeah.
Right. The idea of Chabad, the idea of Chabad Hasidism is that you are...
For you. You don't have to define it for everyone who practices it.
I would say that you are a chelik elekai mimal mamash, that you are a literal piece of God above, mamash. Actually, like, we're not talking in hyperbole, we're not being dramatic, like, you are a part of the divine. And when you can relate to yourself as a soul, as a piece of God, whatever all that I just said even means, you will live differently. You will live a more meaningful life. Your life will just be different. It will be, you'll feel that you have a purpose on this world.
Right. I think that I was saying this yesterday to a friend, that I actually recommended a book that really got me into spirituality in general called A New Earth. I talk about it a lot. It's one of my favorite books. And a friend of mine happened to see it on my Instagram, read it, and he said to me, Taylor, after reading this book, it's like my life can never lack purpose, because it really reminds you who you are at your core, and it's a never-ending mission to do good and to be a light and to be of service and to step out of yourself and to remove the ego. And that's exactly it. When you see yourself as a part of God, when you see yourself a light as part of the infinite light of this world, then you don't need to know what you're going to do for a living to know what your purpose is. Your purpose is at your core to do good in this world, to carry that light, to spread that light, to share that light, and to be as pure as possible, right? Because obviously we associate God with being pure, with being, undefined, and like we said, infinite in its good, right? So, and with faith as well. So we have to carry that light as part of that. That's how I see it, right? I see it as there's this infinite light. I'm one part of that light, and it's my job to spread that light, to be that light, to remember that light exists within me, and it exists in every single one of you listening to this. That's what I hear when I hear that.
Beautiful. I want to just touch on one thing that you said. You mentioned the word like to get rid of the ego. Mm-hmm. So I heard there's this beautiful idea that what does ego stand for? It's an acronym for EGO, edging God out.
Wow.
What is the ego? Ego is the sense of like I exist. I define existence in terms of me. When you feel your ego, the whole world was created for me. That can be a very good thing or a very bad thing.
Wow.
And you have to know that like when the opposite of that, as you said, is living. When you feel your ego, you're edging God out. So what's the opposite of that? It's letting God in. It's letting there be space for something else. Letting there be space for a higher purpose in yourself. But I think like the most important thing is, instead of talking in terms of like these big words, I think the most important thing is maise b'poel, actual act. Like we need to bring it into action.
Yes.
So I would say like let's jump into maybe a couple lines of the Tanya, the broken down version of the Tanya.
So how we normally do this is I actually feel like I'm literally like in second grade, because I just want to remind people here, I do not know so much about this stuff. I am very much a beginner. I'm definitely in first grade, second grade when it comes to, I wouldn't even say first grade, second grade. I'm in kindergarten.
No, I don't think so. I think maybe you think of. I think your soul has already like got its masters and PhD in spirituality. So
thanks, Daniel. So I do feel like I have this intuitive knowing, and when I read these things, it doesn't feel like I'm reading them for the first time. But definitely within this context and in this terminology, I'm very new to it, and that's why this will be fun, because I feel like I do represent the average person listening to this podcast. And what we normally do is we read parts of it and we break it down, we talk about it, and listen closely. And I'm really interested to hear your guys' feedback after this episode, because I'm sure you will take something out of it. So I'm saying that a lot because it's important for me to remind people to be mindful, conscious, and present in this episode in particular.
Add one thing to that is that the way that it started was that I actually, after seeing how brilliant Taylor is, life coaching, all that, I asked Taylor if I could, take on her services as a life coach to help me in certain areas of my life. And Taylor said, we're going to barter. We're going to do. So what we do is we actually sit for 45 minutes and we do life coaching, and then we do 45 minutes and we learn Chassidus Chabad.
Beautiful.
And I think that the important thing, like just growth starts when you say like, oh, I don't know, and I'm ready to be open. So as they say, like we should open up, like open yourself up, and that's when change comes. But you can't, like, you have to open up in order to grow. So
yes.
Same with Hashem's help. Okay.
Yes, let's go.
Okay, so just a little background on Tanya quickly, is that what we're speaking about essentially is we're talking about soul and physicality. So spirituality and physicality are two contrary things, right? So seemingly like you achieve spirituality by being less physical, and vice versa, you achieve physicality by being less spiritual.
Right.
And yeah, so just, I don't know how much we're going to speak about it now, but we're going to discuss souls a little bit and why living a soulful life is important, like at all. And this isn't like, it's cool to see that this idea isn't just within the world of religion and orthodoxy. Everyone wants to live a more soul in tune lifestyle. You told me you watched the Pixar movie Soul, right?
Oh my God.
A few times.
I think I told you. Did I tell you about it?
What? That you
Soul? Did I tell you to watch it?
No. My whole family and I, we watched it together. It was super cute.
What a movie.
Yeah.
What a movie.
Like even animation is now like journeying into the soul, you know, like and purpose, and because I think that's where we're at in life now. Like it's no longer enough to just go to work and then die. You know, like it's like, okay, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
The question I asked myself, and we've spoken about this in our sessions, is like, is this why my soul came down to this earth?
Right.
Is this my mission in this life? And that's what we're all trying to figure out. That's what we're all trying to know. So we're going to take a little aspect of Tanya and I guess
Beautiful.
Delve into that. So we're reading here chapter 25.
Can I just ask when this was written? Like how long ago?
Yes, you can. It was written in the late 1800s.
Nuts.
Yeah.
It's crazy because I think that's what really blows my mind when we're reading this stuff is that it's so much of what you're saying. I'm like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me. And when you realize how long ago this was written, you're like, there is something that remains the same even when technology develops and the modern world starts to develop, and you see that there is at our core, our souls have always had a similar relationship to God, to the world, to each other. You know, it's amazing how applicable and relevant this can be so long after it was written and brought into the world.
That truth doesn't change.
Exactly.
Truth doesn't. Truth doesn't change, and the nature.
Truth. I like that.
Yeah,
truth doesn't change.
No, and a human being who is, you know, the struggle of a human being is true. Like it's part of what we're doing here is the internal struggle, the ups and downs, the pain, like the journeys that we go through within our lives. Mm-hmm. That's true, and the reason that Tanya was written was within the Hasidic world. There is a tradition for a Hasid, a follower of that Rabbi, to go and visit, mm-hmm. whether it be once a year, once every few years, mm-hmm. whatever it was. And the Alter Rebbe, the writer of Tanya, became too busy. Mm. He had too much going on. He was the leader of the Jewish people. There was too much to do. And basically, he wrote a book and he said, any questions that you'll ever have for me, you can find in this book.
Wow.
And it was dealing with issues that people had, how to serve Hashem, how to be a good person, how to overcome desires, temptations,
relationships, parent-child relationships.
It's all in you.
It's all in you.
Nuts. Now, sometimes you have to, you need to be a bit of a genius to see it, but there are parts of it that you can really see that it's speaking to me where I am now, in my pain, in my suffering, wherever I am in my place in life, you can find something that will mamish speak to you.
Yes.
It's worth mentioning, like when before I really started to become religious and started learning, I'd heard of Tanya before. I'd never really learned it before, and I was, if I can be a bit open and honest, I was like in my life at that stage. It was my second year of IDC. My first year was, I would say, an extravagant year of partying and living and hedonism. And at the end of that year, I was like quite exhausted, like mm-hmm. I guess spiritually, but I didn't know what it was. I couldn't diagnose it. And I had a friend who knew that I was Chabad affiliated from back in South Africa, and he asked me like if I wanted to come one Friday night to shul with him, and I said yeah. And I met this kid who was learning it wasn't a Chabad shul, it was actually a Chabad yeshiva here in Tel Aviv, and he invited me to come with him. This kid, he asked me if I wanted to start learning with him. And I said, yeah, I would. I open myself up, that's when the best things happen. And at that stage of my life, like, I wasn't clinically depressed, thank God, but I was like, I was in that space of like, I was stuck. And he asked me, do you want to learn Tanya? And I said, yeah, like, I've heard of it, let's do it. And he opened up to this chapter that we're going to look at now. And I hadn't said anything to him. And I came back like 2 days later and we started learning, and he said to me, this chapter deals with depression. Why does a person get stuck? Why does a person get stuck in himself? Why does he feel the sense of stuckness? And I said, okay, I'm listening. I'm not gonna buy it till I see what he's selling. So we're meant to learn for an hour, and we sat and we spoke and we learned inside and we learned outside. And after an hour, I said, let's learn a little bit longer, a few more minutes. So he said, okay. And we learned a little bit more. We discussed, and I started opening up about myself, where I was at, this and this, and another hour went by. And I said, let's learn a little bit more. And we did. We learned for like 3 hours that night.
Wow.
And I don't want to sound dramatic and say, and I walked out and my whole life was changed and I saw the light, because that's not what happened. But what I did see, and what I remember happening that night very particularly, was I left with the sense of there's another way of looking at the world. There's another pair of glasses that you can put on and you can actually see the world in a different way. and I decided, you know what, I'm going to figure that way out. And Baruch Hashem, a few years have gone by, and
here we are.
And here we are. So
you're teaching it to us.
Yeah, awesome. So
it's beautiful.
Yeah, I guess it's full circle, and we're still in Tel Aviv, thank God. So, l'chaim. All right, we're jumping in. So we're looking at over here. We're looking at chapter 36. So
what's it called?
What's this chapter called? Well, this book actually, interestingly enough, like it breaks the chapters down by, like, they make their own chapters that they base it on other chapters. This one they've called Revealing the Sparks.
Revealing the Spark.
Revealing the godly light that's in the world is an essential stepping stone for the great revelation that will come in the times of Mashiach.
Beautiful.
Okay? So why don't you kick us off?
Okay. As we said previously, God created an entire system of worlds that obscure his great light. However, this concealment is only from our perspective, that is. We don't see God in this world. From God's perspective, he's everywhere equally. This is what God desires, to be revealed specifically in the place of greatest concealment. As such, he first needed to conceal himself.
And then it says over here, concealment and revelation. What if God's presence were revealed everywhere, the truth was visible, and we could feel our souls?
Wow, I want to read that one more time. What if God's presence were revealed everywhere, the truth was visible, and we could feel our souls? What a sentence.
Yeah. So I've heard this idea before, like why did God create the world in such a way that if you want to connect to deeper ideas, you have to sit down, open a book.
Earn it.
You have to earn it.
Yeah.
But all the BS of the world is, just a swipe away, or you can walk outside and see it with your, like, why is lies so much more easily accessible, and truth is, you have to earn it.
Right.
Like why is it like that? And the question is like flipped. Like, imagine it was the other way around. Imagine that you had to really earn it in order to access the lies of the world, and truth was so easily accessible. Like, no one would ever open that book if the lies were. So, but that's how it is. And I think the very simple message behind it is that, like, nothing comes for free. Like, if you want something, you have to earn it.
Wow.
Like,
nothing good comes for free.
I think good comes for free. True.
Yeah.
You got to go to work with yourself. You got to make it a priority. Yeah. But while we were reading that, I was reminded of a cool story.
Okay, I love your stories.
Yeah,
they're always good.
Okay, it's a cool story because it's a story that I read recently about how AA was started, Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. In the mid-1930s, there was a man. His name was Roland Hazard. It's a cool name.
Look at you with that memory, though.
Yeah. No, I read up. I prepared. His name was Roland Hazard, and he was from. Okay, I didn't prepare that well. He was from somewhere in America.
Somewhere in America.
He was a WASP. Okay. And he was a drunk. Mm-hmm. And he basically, his parents wanted to help him. They couldn't help him. There was no such thing as Alcoholics Anonymous at that stage. So they decided to send him to one of the best psychiatric doctors in the world at the time. They didn't send him to the best. They sent him to one of the best. They sent him to Carl Jung. Okay, thank God they didn't send him to Sigmund Freud.
Yeah.
Sigmund Freud was actually a Jew. As a result, I think he had a hard time, accepting spirituality. Another thing. Carl Jung, something else. So they sent him to Carl Jung in Europe. So he gets on a boat. He travels all the way to Europe, and he goes and he is treated for a year by Carl Jung. Okay, and Jung in this year tries to help him overcome his alcoholism. Okay. After a year of being under the care and treatment of Carl Jung, Roland Hazard steps outside and he heads for the port to get back on a ship and head back to America. And before he can even get onto the ship, he's back in a bar and he's wasted.
Shit.
Yeah. So he comes back to Carl Jung, a little bit defeated, a little broken, and he says to him, "What's the story? Like, I thought I was healed." And Carl Jung looks at him and he says, "Look, I'm going to be completely honest with you. A case of alcoholism, a case of addiction that you have, it's very rare that I've seen someone overcome such a thing. And really, I've been like quite, I haven't told you this over the year, but really the only times I've ever seen someone overcome such an enormous addiction like the one that you have is when they've had a sporadic spiritual experience, and I've been trying to recreate this with you for the last year, and I can see that you haven't been able to have one, so my only suggestion to you is like, go and try and have one, and I think that's the only way you're going to be healed.
Wow.
And that's it. And he says, there's nothing more I can do for you.
Wow.
And he sends him off. So Roland Hazard gets on his ship and he gets back to America, and he falls in with this crowd. They were called the Oxford Group. Okay, the Oxford Group was a group of people who decided that they were going to explore authentic Christianity. Okay, they went like all the way back. There's a joke that like, had they gone back one more, it would have been Judaism, religious joke, put it aside. Anyway, so he falls in with this crowd, and they're all about like higher power and all about, helping other people and doing good. And all of a sudden, he has this sporadic spiritual experience, and he overcomes his alcoholism. Okay, wow. Just from doing good and trying to like, God of my understanding kind of thing. Part of the ethos of this group is that like, once you have it, in order to keep it, you have to give it, right? So he runs off and he finds, I'm probably going to get confused with a few of the names now, but he finds another guy, and he teaches another alcoholic, and he teaches it to him. And he's able to help this guy have his sporadic spiritual experience. And this guy goes over to another guy who goes to a man in Brooklyn named Bill Wilson. Okay? And Bill Wilson, when this guy, I think his name was Ebby, walks in and says, listen, Bill, I was able to get sober. It's about God. And he says, you come into my apartment to me about God, I would have thrown you out of here. He says, no, you don't understand. It's not a religious God. It's the God of your understanding. Long story short, he helps Bill Wilson become sober, who's been a mean drunk for all of his life. And all of a sudden they sit down and they're like, this is real stuff. Like, we could help people. And they take everything that they've done and they've learned and they put it into a book. And that is how the big book, which is people who have ever been into an AA meeting, an NA meeting, or any kind of addiction meeting will know, that's the book that AA, that addiction therapy was based on. Okay?
Wow.
A few years go by, and Bill Wilson, the founder of AA, asks someone, by the way, did anyone, I think 30 years went by, he asks, did anyone ever write to Carl Jung to tell him that what he told Roland Hazard all those 30 years ago resulted in AA? Like, we've saved hundreds of thousands of people from the clutches of addiction. And they say no. So he sits down and he pens a letter, and I actually have it at home, a copy of the response that Carl Jung wrote to Bill Wilson. And I can actually send it over to you. But in that letter, so it was actually right before Carl Jung fell sick and died. I've heard that it was like one of the last letters that he wrote, maybe one of the last letters he wrote in English, last letters he wrote in his life before he passed away. And in that letter, he writes to Carl Jung saying, thank you for writing. Sorry, Carl Jung writes to Bill Wilson, the founder of AA. He says, thank you for writing to me to tell me what happened to Roland Hazard. I always wondered what happened to him. And the reason that I was apprehensive to speak about addiction, about spirituality in line with overcoming addiction was it wasn't acceptable back then. Like, Sigmund Freud was the leader of psychiatry back then. Like, how dare you speak about the soul, spirituality? It's about the ego and the self and the id, and he feared to be ridiculed. He said, but he said, like, he wrote something very, very powerful, and I'm sorry I didn't bring the exact thing, but at the end of the letter he writes, spiritus contra spiritus, that he said that what I realized within Roland Hazard and what I've learned over the last 30 years is that people who are seeking numbing substances that they become addicted to, they're doing it because they have this feeling within themselves, and I'm paraphrasing, and he writes there, the medieval speech, what medieval speech would refer to as a longing to connect to the infinite one.
Wow.
That where does this sense of feeling the need to numb ourselves come from? It comes from wanting to be connected. It comes from this feeling of wanting to be connected to something higher, for our souls to feel awake and alive. And spirits, which is what we call alcohol, he writes at the bottom in Latin, spirit contra spiritus, that what is the remedy for overcoming the addiction to spirits? contra spiritus. It's spirituality.
Wow.
So if anyone wants to know what is AA, what heals people from addiction, it's spirituality. Why?
Yeah.
Because how do you overcome the most painful things in the world? It's by touching the deepest parts of yourself. Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing story.
Wow. And I think that, people hear this and it's not just alcohol addiction, right? There's so many things that we use to numb ourselves, whether it's money, sex, food. Food is one of them. People who eat to numb their emotions, people don't really see that as an addiction, but it is. And whenever we're doing something that's self-destructive, something that is causing us harm, to disconnect from ourselves because we can't find ourselves, that is so true that I feel like that is what's happening. We are trying to numb ourselves because we don't feel connected to ourselves, because we feel this internal conflict, we feel lost, we feel stuck. And it's easier to overly consume something that is just taking us out of our mind so that we can rest a little bit in that process, that really painful process of trying to connect to what is true within us and to our spiritual beings inside of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's feeling is something that we're doing less of. Like, that's why our phones have become so addictive, because the minute I pull my phone out and I start swiping through whatever it is, I don't have to feel. I don't have to think. Yeah, it's an unconscious thing, and you don't have to be present. And I'm excited you're coming to Shabbat tonight.
Yes.
It's a meditative space of, like, maybe for 4 hours we're focused on what we're drinking and we're eating and relaxing, and think that for a person to feel whole, not even from a spiritual aspect, you have to do some sort of digital detox. You have to take a walk by. I know you do this, right?
Yeah.
You take walks by yourself, no phone.
Or when we sit, when my phone's on airplane mode.
And I take note that when you sit down with someone, you don't put your phone on the table. You put it on airplane mode in your pocket.
Yeah.
Taylor does it. It's unbelievable. Like, there's nothing more beautiful than you can give to a person by being present. Like, being present in their presence.
Yeah, I feel like the tricky thing about this is that being fully present is the medicine we need, because it makes us more conscious, but being fully present when we're in pain is really difficult. And the only way to remove that pain is to sit in that presence, to let that pain come and go and wait for the reward that comes after that. When I sit in silence, when we're sitting to meditate, when we're sitting and trying to be fully present doing something, there is this initial resistance internally of no, I don't want to feel, no, I don't want to experience any discomfort. But if you sit in that long enough and you wait for it to pass, the other side of that is the most peaceful, loving, and warm place that you can be. But you earn it, like we said. You have to earn it. You have to get there through the work. You have to do the work and intentionally set time in your day to be conscious and not live in the unconscious mind, because that is not living in the spiritual. That's not living in your soul. That's living in the physical.
Yeah. Actually, I'm happy that you mentioned that. The acronym Chabad, it's an acronym, and it stands for Chochmah, Bina, and Dat, which is talking about the different ways of thought. So Chochmah is that initial point where an idea enters your mind. We don't have control over that.
Impulsive thought?
It's your mind is a never stopping flow of thoughts. It's a river that just never stops. That's Chochmah. That's just you don't control what comes in. Bina, which is the next Wisdom is taking that idea and stretching it and elongating it and really diving into that thought. We have a lot of control over that. People don't realize it. People say, I don't have control over my thoughts. You're right, you don't have control over that part of your thought, but you have absolute control over what you decide to delve on.
Yes, how you react to the thoughts.
Exactly. If you choose to focus on a thought, as whether it's positive or negative, that will affect you, and then that comes down into das, the last part of thought, which is it goes from thought into emotions. It affects you. It changes the way you feel, the way you stand, the way you move, and the way that people pick up on your energy
you carry. Yep. Exactly. I feel like a client of mine yesterday said, So what do I do if when I wake up in the morning and I don't make myself breakfast, I'm just thinking, you're so lazy, you're so pathetic, you're such a loser, you're such a this. I'm like, that's okay. It's okay. It's okay that your mind goes there, but you can take a minute and say, you can either dwell on that thought and say, okay, yeah, I am lazy, yeah, I am terrible, yeah, I am pathetic, and take it there and carry that energy with you, or you can stop and say, I'm amazing, I'm doing great. I am productive. I'm going to do something about this, because you can't control the thoughts that are impulsive, but you can react to them, you can respond to them, you can replace them as many times as possible. And I gave her a beautiful analogy that I use a lot, that I see helps a lot of people, that you're the sky and your thoughts are clouds. And when I look at a cloud and watch it pass above me, it'll take a really long time to see it fully pass from one place, from the sky to the other. But when I'm just living my life, so many clouds are passing above my head without me even noticing. Wow. And I told her, when you fixate on a cloud, when you fixate on a thought, it seems much more painful and much more heavy than it really is. You have to create space between the cloud and the sky. You have to just be the sky and watch the cloud, because whether you look at it or not, it's going to pass at the same rate, but it's going to pass. There's no cloud that stays in one place forever. No cloud, not one. So if you create that space and watch the clouds pass, that's how you create peace.
Wow.
But it's by disassociating with them.
It's a beautiful analogy.
Thanks.
It's a really, really beautiful analogy.
Thanks.
The sun will always come out.
Yeah. And the clouds will always move.
The clouds will always move.
The clouds will always move.
Okay.
Okay, continue?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to just...
Tell us what the sentence is saying.
Well, I wanted to just maybe like shift into just a thought like that I was having while we were talking, is that we're talking like a little bit about addiction and people like numbing themselves out, and from experience as well as, you know, talking to people and knowing how people, you know, knowing how people feel. Like, I think that some of the biggest contributors to pain is the feeling of not being in control of your life.
Yeah.
What adds to that pain is like you'll go onto social media and you'll see people living these extraordinary lives, and you're sitting, you know, in your sweatpants with shitty food, and it's like...
And a joint.
and like life is not as glamorous as the people in Mykonos and, you know, in blue water all their lives. And it's like, you feel even more depressed, and there's this feeling in life of like people feel stuck and they feel like sometimes like they are not in control of their lives. And and in going back to what we were saying before, like ego, edging God out, like, not to say that that's egotistical, but it's saying that what a lot of people feel, and a lot of pain that people feel, is that they feel that they are in control of their lives. And I think that that's a huge misconception that people think, that there is a certain element of your life that you have control over. You can react and you can choose and reframe. But there's also an element of life that you actually have absolutely no control over whatsoever. What would you suggest to someone who makes a choice to do something and then it doesn't work out, and it's like they put everything on the line for that kind of decision?
I would say that you can never label anything as a positive or negative outcome, because you don't know what it leads to. And like we said, you know, when we think of God, we think of infinite. You know, it's really infinite. There are infinite things that can come out of everything. So who are you to decide that something is negative or positive? You know, you can't label a situation or experience as, oh, this was a bad decision.
Right.
This is a bad outcome, because that bad outcome can lead to something that you needed to go through that bad outcome to get to the good outcome. But that's the thing, you cannot be in the other decision once you've made your decision. Or it's because you can't regret if you choose something fully.
Right.
You can't regret. Once you make a decision, let's say you decide you're going to move to a different place and you're going to sell all your things and you're just going to go. From that point on, no part of you is allowed to think of the other choice, because you're fully making a decision. You have to fully go into it knowing that the opportunities and the outcomes are infinite, and be there fully. There is no chokhmah in being both places in your mind.
Yeah. I have personally experienced this pain that I think is very common to human beings, of making plans and then them not working out, and then having to deal with that, and feeling like I have zero control over my life, and that's a very painful place to be. And I think that I once heard...
Do you have an example?
In my own life?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I finished yeshiva, I wanted to move to New York very badly. And basically I went back to South Africa for Pesach, for Passover for like a few weeks. And I was really meant to be there for a few weeks. I had a visa kind of sorted out to get into America on a student visa. And 4 days before I found out that before I was flying, I found out that I had to have a surgery on my leg that meant I was going to be stuck in South Africa for the year. Mm-hmm. And it was like a gut shot, like wind knocked out of me. Mm-hmm. My whole plans were just like, I had no plans to live in South Africa, no plans to have surgery. And, for about 8, 9, 10 months later, I was, thank God, fully recovered, ready to try again. And this time I went through another route and this, and I was meant to leave again, in 5 days, and I went to go and just sort out the last minute things on my visa, and it got declined. Mm-hmm. And it was like a year of hope and dream and thing was like literally just flushed down the toilet. And that's painful, and I think that's something that people experience a lot of, like this pain of having plans that don't actualize. It could be a love that you thought you were going to marry that you don't. It could be a job that you thought you were going to get that you don't get. That you really I like to say that you make movies in your head about how it's going to look and how it's going to feel and how it's going to be and what you're going to do and how... Which
is fine as long as you're not attached to them.
Yeah, but that's very difficult to not be attached to them.
Mm-hmm. But what do you think you needed to learn from that?
Well, I can tell you what I did learn.
Right, because I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves. Because if you are at a place where you have any level of faith in a power bigger than yourself, you have to believe, or I say choose to believe, that things don't happen stam. Stam means like for no reason. Things don't happen for no reason. And that's a choice that you make. You can go around in the world thinking that what I'm saying is bullshit, and that's fine, but you gain so much more out of life when you seek the meaning behind obstacles like that, because especially as someone who's religious, God wouldn't do that for no reason. So what do you think the reason was in hindsight? What did you need to learn?
So I mean...
Probably many things.
Like everything you said that could be broken down into a whole thing. But first of all, like, those are two very different ways of living. There's people that live that life is completely random and things happen and there's no connection between A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. And I feel very sorry for those people because I don't know how they make sense of anything.
Me too.
And then there's living life in the sense of like every single moment. There's a famous teaching of the Baal Shem Tov that says there isn't a leaf that blows over in the wind, a dying leaf that's already fallen on the ground, that doesn't blow over in the wind if God doesn't will it so. How much more so does every single moment, every single happening of a person's life is governed, is divine providence by Hashem, by God. So I tell you what happened to me in that scenario and what I learned from it, and it's a lesson that I'll keep learning in life through different circumstances.
Until you learn it.
Yeah, well, there's the same lesson is just you can learn it on deeper and deeper and deeper levels. And you see that it applies to every single facet. I heard, basically when this happened the first time that I found out I had to have the surgery, it just rocked me like completely. And so basically after I found out that I was going to have the surgery and my world was rocked and I wasn't, going along with what my plans were, a mashpia of mine, a mentor of mine, called to tell me the following story. Mm-hmm. And this story really glistened a lot of truth for me. He's a speaker. He told me that when he was 25 years old, he was very young and naive. He was offered to do a speaking arrangement for terminally ill patients.
You told me this story. It really helped me in a really dark place.
So, I should say it again?
Of course you should say it again. We're not talking to each other only.
Right, okay. Told me that basically he's given the speaking arrangement. As he's driving into the event...
He's going to speak to terminally ill
patients about suffering, faith in the face of adversity. And while he's driving in, he clicks. He's like, what the heck do I know about such a topic? I'm talking about sick people. I don't know adversity like they do. Like, what am I doing? And he's pulling into like the parking garage, and he says it's like a well-organized event, and a woman is standing there with a clipboard, and she's like pulling him out the car, and he's got kind of no choice to back out of it. So he's a rabbinical-looking person, but he feels like a regular guy, but he realizes that like whatever he's going to say, people are going to think it's like a Jewish thought. So he decides, I'm going to say something. If people like it, great. If they don't, I'll just say like, that wasn't real Judaism, I made it up. Like, if you want to figure it out, go ask someone who knows more, So he's brought up onto the stage in front of the podium and the mic, and he tells the following story. He says that, so he's in a room, he's talking to terminally ill patients about suffering about faith in the face of adversity. And he says that in the late 70s, there was a genre of film, new wave film. And the greatest French directors, they were sitting around and they were discussing the greatest who was the greatest film director to ever live. And the greatest one amongst them, he said unequivocally, it was Alfred Hitchcock. And they were all intrigued. Hitchcock, why Hitchcock? And he said it's very simple. If you take all of Hitchcock's work, the thousands of hours, the hundreds of films, the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of shots, and you look at them, and you will see that he achieved perfection. There is no superfluous shot. There's nothing missing. There's nothing there that could have been removed. Like, he achieved perfection in his work. So the rabbi was telling the story. He says, if Hitchcock, a man of flesh and blood, who's limited by definition, both in budget and extras and locations and ideas, can achieve some sort of perfection in his work, how much more so for the director of the whole world, who is directing each and every single one of our lives.
Wow.
I mean, just pause from the story for a second. God is not lazy. He doesn't take breaks. He directs each and every single one of our lives to the T. From, if he's directing each one of those leaves to turn over, the depth and intricacy of a human being who's full of emotion and thought and passion, and God is really there in every single millisecond and moment. So going back to the story, he's busy saying this over, and a woman in the crowd puts her hand up, and you can see that she's quite sick, and she says, Rabbi, I want to say something. So he's like, oh, here we go. It's happening. So he's ready to back out, and he tries to talk over, and she goes, Rabbi, I want to say something. So she makes her way up to the podium, and she says, I want to tell you that people have thought that I've gone crazy, because when people in my family ask me if I wish I never got sick, I tell them no. And they think that I've given up hope, and that's not the truth. The truth is I want to beat this, I want to get healthy, but for me to wish that I never got sick would be for me to wish that I didn't have this life. And I want to see how this story ends. I'm involved, I'm interested, I'm present in this story.
Wow.
For me to wish that I never got sick would be for me to wish that I didn't have this story. I want this story. I want to know how this story ends.
Wow.
She said, you've finally given me a way of being able to relate and explain that to them, so thank you. And I think that a message to whoever listens and to ourselves, to everyone in this room, is that life is so unpredictable, and sometimes things happen that we want, and Baruch Hashem, there should be many of those moments. But then there's sometimes that life it's unpredictable. We don't always get what we want. But if you are able to lean into the fact that God is looking out for you every single moment of your life, Hashem, God is governing that, you're not alone. And just to go back to what we said, what if God's presence was revealed everywhere? The truth was visible and we could feel our souls. You can take that idea. You know that every single moment of your life is governed by Hashem, is governed by God. You will live a little bit of that life. You will feel your soul, because you know that nothing happens if it wasn't meant to happen. You don't miss your alarm if you weren't meant to miss it.
Yes.
You don't hit a red light if you weren't meant to hit it.
Yes.
You're able to live a much more harmonious with the universe life, and that's what it's all about. So,
L'chaim, that's beautiful. I think that that should not be mistaken with living life passively. That should not be mistaken with not taking action. And, a lot of people can hear this and say, well, then why wake up and go to work in the morning? Why work out? Why take care of myself? It's actually what's beautiful and what's actually so complicated about it is that the more you surrender, the more you have energy to do those things, the more grateful you are for your life and you're more connected to yourself, the more you want to achieve. You come from a better place when you come from faith and not fear. When you are working from a place of faith, when you're working from a place of trust, you are working, carrying a different energy than when you are working from a place of ego.
And I think that is the common misconception, that it's so easy to say, oh, everything's God
will take care of it.
I can tell you now from experience that it's not. It's not easy to say, Gam zu letova, this is also for the good. When you want something and it doesn't happen, it's not easy to say, oh, good, it's fine, God. It takes a lot. It's much easier to get angry and to blame and to sulk and to become depressed. And what takes real hard work is to say, I don't know the whole picture. I can't see the whole puzzle. I've only been given one piece, and I'm not going to make a decision on what the whole thing looks like.
Wow.
I'm going to take this piece, and I'm going to wait for the next piece and the next piece. And slowly the puzzle comes together, and
You told me this story when my grandma passed away and my boyfriend broke up with me, and I was in a really, really bad place. And I remember telling you, wow, that my grandma she got cancer when she was really lively and really active and really finally starting to live life for herself. And not only did she not tell people that she had cancer, she didn't even act like she had cancer. She was happy and smiling and grateful. And if you asked her how she is, amazing. I saw her, a kol dvash, everything is honey. Yeah. So every time I would see her, she was so grateful to be alive. And she would say things like, whenever he decides to take me, he'll take me. And I told you, my great-grandmother passed away on Erev Rosh Hashanah. Wow. She made the whole Chag dinner and she went to go to take a nap and she just never woke up. The most peaceful death ever. I'm named after her, Yona.
Wow.
Yeah, and my grandmother, so that was my great-grandmother, my grandmother, her whole life said, if God loves me, I'll pass away on Erev Rosh Hashanah because I don't want a shiva and I want to pass away like her great-grandmother did. She was my great-grandmother on my grandpa's side, but still she always said, I want to pass away on Rosh Hashanah. And she passed away on Erev Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, she did. She passed away on Erev Rosh Hashanah on a Friday, on Shabbat. And it's like she really asked for the way that she wanted to leave this world, and she did. She didn't suffer. She left on Erev Rosh Hashanah. We didn't have a shiva. We were like, wow, she's a G. She lived a G and she died a G because she asked for it. And she, I told her whole saying in life was a kol dvash, everything is honey, and Rosh Hashanah, and it was so symbolic. It was like I couldn't even be sad that she passed away because I was so happy for her. Wow. Her soul got exactly what it wanted. And so when I was at her funeral, obviously I was very upset, but afterwards, people were like, Taylor, how are you not sad? And everyone was really, really devastated. And I was like, she's so happy with this. This is exactly what she wanted. How could I be sad about this? That's so selfish to be sad. She got exactly what she wanted. Had she lived longer, she would have suffered with this terrible disease. She didn't want to suffer. She wanted to leave exactly on that day. Wow. So I was happy for her. People thought I was crazy, but ever since then, ever since that night we sat for Jews who told me this story, it really helped me even more so believe and surrender that everything's happening for the right reason. You told me, start lighting Shabbat candles, and from that day on till now, even if I'm on vacation, even if I go somewhere, I bring my Shabbat candles with me every single Friday since that day, which is almost 2 years ago. I light Shabbat candles. Yeah. Let's end with this. Why do we light Shabbat candles?
Wow.
Tell us.
Listen, there's a whole the Lubavitcher Rebbe's 10 campaigns to spread Judaism around the world, and one of them was Neshek. Ner Shabbos Kodesh, okay?
Shabbos
candles.
Shabbos candles.
Yes.
For those who are non-Jewish listening to this, Jews light candles every Shabbat, every Friday, to welcome in the Shabbat, basically.
To bring in the Sabbath.
Bring in the Sabbath.
So one of the emissaries of the Rebbe was sent to, if I'm not mistaken, it was Alaska, the furthest most part of America, right? Alaska's all the way west. And he went there, and there's a whole story of how he got there and why he was there, but they were there looking for Jews, and he met a woman, and she mentioned that she had a daughter in the school, and he realized that this daughter was literally the youngest Jewish girl living on the westernmost point of the world, okay? Mm-hmm. And he gave her Shabbos candles. She didn't know a thing about Judaism, okay? She said, like, what is this? So he told her this, and it's such a beautiful imagery if you think about it, but he said that on a Friday, for thousands of years, Jewish women welcome the Sabbath by lighting candles. This has been happening for thousands of years, since Sarah, Avram and Sarah. And if you think about what the world must look like from Hashem, from God's point of view, is that you see in Australia, that's where it starts, right? You have these little fires, these little bits of light starting in Australia. And as Shabbos comes in around the globe, more and more happening. So there's like a nice fire in Australia, then a few in Europe, a massive fire over Israel when Shabbos comes in Israel, pretty decent sized fire in South Africa, I have to say, shout out to South Africa. It moves over, there's a little bit of a delay while it goes over the ocean, the Atlantic, and then when it gets to New York, friggin' massive fire, moves over the whole of America, South America, LA, pretty deep. And then he said, and then Hashem waits. He waits for the last Jewish girl in the whole world to light one extra flame.
Wow.
And he was talking to this little girl, the youngest girl that lived on the westernmost point in the whole world.
Wow.
And what is the idea? The idea is that as human beings, we think that we can't affect the world, that we can't change it, that maybe we don't have the power to change anything.
Wow.
And Shabbos candles teach us that you don't have to change the whole world. You just have to add a little bit of light, and in doing that, you change the whole world.
Wow. We're filming this on a Friday here in Israel, so I will say Shabbat Shalom.
Good Shabbat.
We're about to have Shabbat dinner together, so I'm going to let Daniel go because he probably has to
a lot of
cooking to do. I think I just want to end by saying we read one sentence. We read one sentence from this book, and look how much came out of it. This is why I love meeting with Daniel and speaking to him. Not only do I get so much from it, I leave with energy. I leave with a brighter light than I came in with every single time I sit with you. And wow, I'm so happy that I got to share this with other people, and I'm sure I'll have him back because there's just too much to talk about. So
I would be glad to. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, Daniel.
It's always a pleasure.
See you later.
See you later.
Bye, guys.